Interest rates, tax law, macroeconomic impact on startups. We're going to talk about all of that on today's Builders Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wink. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. I know the entrepreneurial journey. It's a lot in the weeds day to day, working in the business, not always working on the business, but a macroeconomic environment does have an impact on early stage companies, innovation, and economic growth. So we like to check in on a more macro lens from time to time. And I'm getting to do that today with Kurt Simmons, Jr., he's Withum's audit partner, and Daniel Krolikowski, sorry, Daniel, who's member of the FIRB's Private Client Services Group and leads the Founders and Technology Executives Group too. Daniel, Kurt, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Chris. Absolutely. All right. I love talking to people who speak a lot to clients on a range of topics. We're going to get to what we can. Let's talk with a wide lens, and then we'll try to get into some of the tax law stuff, where interest rates are, what you guys are hearing from your clients. But by way of introduction, Kurt and Daniel, we know entrepreneurship rates, business starts, a ton boomed post-pandemic. Give me a little sense of what are you guys seeing right now? What are the trend lines you're seeing among your clients? Kurt, I can throw it to you, but I'd love you and Daniel both giving me like what you're seeing in the trenches.
Yeah, this one actually probably should be handled more by Daniel, because I mean he's really in the trenches from a tax perspective. So although
I love the deference,
you handed it to me, but I'm going to do a
deal. Daniel.
Handoff.
Chris, happy to kind of give my thoughts in terms of like general entrepreneurship. Per the Department of U.S. Treasury, there has been a surge in new business formations. I think there's about 430,000 new business applications per month, which are up 50% from pre-pandemic levels. And there's also, growing trends towards a more direct, diverse workforce. Women and minority, are participating more and more in entrepreneurship. And for example, right now, about 43% of self-employed individuals are women. So, we are seeing, because of the diversity that's growing in the workforce, a lot of new ideas constantly coming up. And then in terms of fundraising, investors are just being more selective post-pandemic. I think, as interest rates were near zero, valuations were sky high, money was really cheap. People were sort of being less thoughtful about where they're making investments. But now, as money's become a little bit more expensive, we are seeing, sort of a increase between the timing of fundraising, generally, exceeds 24 months. There's been a lot of down rounds. Investors have appeared to, prioritize profitability, cash flow, sustainable growth over sort of the old model, which is like, hey, let's just grow and get users, no matter the cost, there's going to be additional fundraising. So we are seeing just, a little bit of change in that there are more businesses, out there. However, there is more competition for fundraising in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's push further on the interest rate topic that you guys bring up. I'm here for you guys being the serious adults who speak to a whole lot of companies across industries, including growth stage. So a debate that I run in is how much the kind of chatter about AI's impact on jobs, how much is this really an interest rate story? That really interest rates are what did what interest rates do. Higher interest rates put brakes on an economy, and a very forward-looking tech innovation sector radically clamped down and led to a lot of high-profile layoffs and slowdowns. I guess starting things off, when talking to clients at the audit level or just talking shop, like what are you guys seeing in are you hearing AI actually have impact inside any firms? Interest rates more what people are talking about? Give me a little sense of what you guys are hearing from clients.
Yeah, I mean, from a client perspective, I don't know if it necessarily is a direct correlation between AI and interest rates. From a client perspective, we are seeing a lot of clients being able to utilize AI to help needs. It varies, to be honest. Different industries, different sectors utilize AI for, a multitude of different things. Now, with that being said, I think that we still have, some serious advancements and a lot more opportunity, and we can be able to utilize AI, in the future. I think, what we're utilizing it for right now is just at its infancy stage, and it has a ton of opportunity to grow. But if you look at a lot of the companies now, and I know Dan will touch on this, is that companies are investing a ton of money into research and development around this AI and what it can do and the efficiencies that it can gain. So really, it's by utilizing all of this R&D and the new bills that are being passed, how can companies get some type of tax breaks as a result of that? So, Dan, I don't know if you want to kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, speaking directly to sort of the tax breaks, if you now do sort of domestic research and development, you can expense that today, right? And still also get potentially an R&D credit. So you get the deduction and you can get a credit related to those expenses. So great win for tax purposes. Sort of to enhance that, any foreign R&D expenses have to be capitalized over 15 years, and you cannot get a U.S. tax credit for that. So you kind of look at, do companies start shifting, sort of their research and development from historically what's been done overseas because it's been a lot cheaper to now possibly bringing some of that back to the U.S.
Daniel, stay on that for a sec. Is that the Section 174 stuff out of the Trump tax law, or something different, or is that?
No, it's 174, Chris.
Got it. Okay. No, that's good because we did some reporting on that. Can you linger on that in a sec? Are there what are you guys talking to clients about the most? And is this one example in and around tech innovation space? Because I guess my understanding from afar is the actual central change there was that R&D spend, how it had to be amortized over time, changed. Give me a quick kind of.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. So right now we're actively talking to clients because there are decisions to be made. Over the last couple of years, you've actually had to amortize U.S. research and development over 5 years. So there are sort of decisions to make now with the new tax law in terms of can you amend old returns? Can you make changes today? Do you kind of leave the R&D how it is, right? So would definitely urge startups, especially technology startups, companies that are doing R&D expenses to kind of, work with a tax accountant, work with the CPA to figure out, what's sort of, the best way in terms of a tax perspective or from a cash flow perspective to sort of capitalize on the new tax law because it is retroactive. And then Chris, to kind of expand on it, the other big change that we saw for startups is sort of the enhancement of Section 1202, qualified small business stock. The enhancements that were made, basically make it a little bit more appealing for founders when they're creating their startups to possibly incorporate right away, and then also companies that theoretically didn't qualify as a qualified small business stock under Section 1202. Maybe their assets were above $50 million. There can be potential for them to still qualify. The three major enhancements under Section 1202 were one, the company, can have gross assets, and that's not valuation, right? So a lot of people think that's valuation, but that's really tax basis and assets of up to 75 million versus the old rule 50 million. So more companies, may qualify under 1202 and may consider issuing new stock to founders, to employees, et cetera, to get additional benefit. The other changes were that, instead of getting a $10 million exclusion, you now can get a $15 million exclusion for QSBS that's issued post July 5th, 2025 this year. And then the last one is that, historically you've had to hold qualified small business stock for 5 years to get any benefit. Now there's a benefit for 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years of holding where you can exclude, 50% up to 15 million, 75% up to 15 million, or 100% up to 15 million. So, again, a lot of these enhancements, may lead to more founders looking at, should I structure as a C corporation to qualify for these additional benefits?
And I think one of the things, just to add to that, Dan, and I think you agree, is that getting in front of this stuff earlier than later is key to the process. And you don't want to go down the path of structuring your company or a deal in a particular way and then not realize you kind of lost out on a significant number of tax advantages. So again, as Dan mentioned, sitting down, talking to your advisors, whoever that may be, making sure you really understand the intricacies of these changes in the tax laws and the benefits that you can have think go a very, very long way for, a lot of these founders that are looking to, eventually grow into a very, very profitable and large organization.
Yeah, I feel like I can speak fairly for a portion of entrepreneurs who are subject matter in the business they are running, but not tax law. And so when as a journalist who covers this, I'm trying to keep this running tab of section changes, and I always have a half dozen open tabs of different. It's overwhelming. I stopped listening at some point, and I'm sure there's a class of entrepreneur who is quite expert in their business, but is like, section 174, does that relate to me? Or the section 83 change, is that me? Is that? So your point is like, maybe have the conversation with someone, because the worst thing is Kurt or Daniel goes like, no, there's nothing to do with you. Like, that's the worst thing.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. The best case scenario is, there could be some advantages. So again, you don't know that until you have the conversation. And again, conversation takes an hour. So
heard. And the point is, we have had a few years of some tax law changes at the federal level at minimum. Okay, I only have a few more minutes with you, and I want to keep pushing. Let me scan here. So can I push you guys more on the interest rate thing? So we were chatting before we came on live, and I'll say it again. One of the more common comments I get when I do like social videos is if I breathe the word AI, someone will yell at me and be like, none of the employment or tech changes have anything to do with AI. It's all hype. Everything that has changed has been tax law, interest rates. That's what we're experiencing. I guess I'm just interested in you guys because you talk to so many different companies. Like, how much are you weighing? The AI stuff's a little bit talk. It's all theoretical versus no, I am talking to clients and I'm really seeing it happen. Are you guys like, do you have your own stance? Are you seeing it in your own firm? Like what's your read right now?
Me personally, I don't have a stance either way. I see companies that are, have an advantage and they're utilizing it.
Do you, is that real? Like you really are like, yeah, I hear real credible changes happening in firms that you talk to, like real.
Yeah, like real credible changes where they can actually see an ROI that's can be tagged to it. And other ones kind of have a different view of it. So it really kind of depends on the company, on the industry. I don't think there's any clear, hard, fast answer as to, okay, yes, this definitely has an impact. It really depends on the company. Dan, I don't know if you have something else or if you've seen something different.
Yeah, so to talk about, Chris and Kurt, maybe just like a couple of examples that I've seen. I still think we're like in the early stages where everybody's trying to figure out, how to use AI, to the best way. I've seen, where AI has been actually utilized as sort of like a scheduling coordinator. So when you go to make meetings with somebody, you think that, hey, this person's, secretaries like emailing me back, but it's actually like AI, for example, that's helping keep their calendar and schedule stuff. And then, on the biggest scale, right? I don't know if Meta would pay, that kind of money for scale AI if there wasn't some kind of, benefit, to it. So I personally think that, we're all still in the early stages figuring out, how to use AI to its best capability. It seems like, right now we're seeing it used a lot for, sort of data mining, for lack of a better word. And, how do we, increase the uses? I have heard where, if there's things that can sort of be formulaed, and things that are repetitive, that there may be additional sort of use cases in the near term. So, you think about like certain things like HR functions, scheduling, things like that, where, maybe AI can be used. But I think, there's still a lot more to come in the future with AI specifically. And then Chris, I think they're two different things, right? I think, when you look at like, AI, I believe I saw a stat where like 30% of venture capital fundraising in 2024 went to AI, right? So we'd sort of talked a little bit about, how the sort of, VC landscape is changing, but, a lot of the VC money is still going into AI. So is that a sign of like, hey, there's sort of, future applicability to some of these? Obviously, maybe not all of them will work out. And I think, the interest rate is sort of a different conversation, more of a macro, conversation as well. And in terms of, when interest rates, generally decrease, like we've seen, during the pandemic, valuations were a lot higher. In the future, if interest rates, appear to decrease, valuations could theoretically go higher, and companies and founders, executives, etc., could theoretically, expect more in return, for their companies based on those valuations. And generally, whenever interest rates goes down, economic conditions sort of ease, and fundraising becomes more available in general, whether it's AI, whether it's other companies. So, I think, AI has a lot of, it's like a buzzword right now. And I think that, all companies are trying to figure out how we can sort of leverage AI. But I think the interest rates sort of affect, all companies as well.
Mm-hmm. You're making me think, like, over my, 16 years interviewing, following, talking to entrepreneurs, there's at least two kinds of entrepreneurs. There are those who are leading established businesses of any size, or they themselves could be, maybe they are stewarding capital as VCs or otherwise. And I have talked to them about their macroeconomic opinions and impact of interest rates on their business decision making. And this would be the kind of also the classic, like, I'm operating a manufacturing business and I'm deciding if I'm opening the other plant. Like, that is very real. But then in the last 20 years, we've had this kind of asset light software, or even like what we are loosely calling innovation economy startup. They're never thinking of this macroeconomic stuff. They are trying to find a market niche. They're testing on an hypothesis. They're running 1 million miles a minute at a problem, regardless of what's happening in the macroeconomic environment. Do you guys think that's like inevitable, and those are just two different approaches, or do you think it's foolhardy to not be paying attention to the macroeconomic changes?
I mean, I think you have to pay attention to the macroeconomic changes, because it definitely has a direct correlation to overall funding. I mean, all of these individual entrepreneurs, are looking for that initial capital investment, or that second seed or third round of funding. And again, the macroeconomics play an integral role in that. So, if you're not paying attention to that, I would strongly encourage you to pay attention to it, because again, it's going to have a massive trickle down effect.
All right.
Yeah, Chris, just to add one thing real quick, I think, to answer your question, it kind of comes with experience too, right? So if you're a first-time founder, first-time, person starting a company, you may not think about all these things, right? But if you're on your third, fourth company, you're probably very attuned to this stuff as well. Like Kurt was saying. So I think some of that comes with just like, having the right advisors, having the right people around you, asking the right questions, and sort of just figuring it out as well. But I definitely think that it's applicable to all companies.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's I hadn't thought about that. All right, I'm gonna lose you guys. So let me stage off with maybe an easy one, but maybe we get somewhere interesting. You guys have in your materials, you reference a lot, begin with the end in mind, which is a nice truism. So let's help make it more interesting than just marketing language. When you talk to a founder, what does it mean to begin with the end in mind? What does that like literally mean when you're, sitting down, either Kurt in a consultative way, or Daniel when you're at that, like, talking to that founder? What does that actually mean, begin with the end in mind?
Yeah, so a lot of times, for better, for worse, you have to make decisions today, especially when you're thinking about income taxes. And again, they may or may not be permanent, but they generally will affect today. But you usually have to make those decisions, based on a future outlook. So for example, depending on what your goal is for a company, are you gonna, try to grow it to just kind of have cash flow? Are you going to create a company to eventually sell? If you are going to sell it, do you think you're going to sell equity? Do you think you're going to sell assets? Who would be the investors? Who would be the advisors? For example, if you're going to go after public institution money or venture capital money, they tend to like C corporations. If you're going to look for, other investors, that may be looking, to buy assets, or you're going to look for, other types of funds besides VCs, like hedge funds, for example, that generally like, flow through investments. You generally may have to think about today, what is my end goal? What do I think is going to happen? and sort of make decisions. So, we're there, as part of hopefully your trusted advisor team, like other CPAs, to, be able to try to help you answer those questions. How will it affect you today? How will it affect you in the medium term? How will it affect you in the long term? And, hopefully monitor that and make additional changes and decisions. But, a lot of times you need to sort of, try to be forward looking in order to have the best outcomes.
Before I throw to Kurt to maybe help close this out, Daniel, why do you work with the entrepreneurs you do? Like, you as a person, why do you do that?
One, because I'm interested in it, and I feel, I guess two, that I can make a difference. So, I've been at Withum, it'll be 10 years in November, and, sort of found that, there is a lot of, sort of areas where, people really don't know this stuff. When I go to get an oil change, for example, I don't necessarily know how to do it, right, Chris? Like, I sort of, have found trusted advisors to sort of do that oil change and tell me, like, hey, this is what I have to do to my car. And, you kind of work, through that, so to say. So sort of liken it to that, and, just enjoy being somebody that can help provide solutions and, hopefully have a really good, sort of benefit, so to say. So, sort of value add to people, whether it's tax savings or just, other value adds in general.
Kurt, send us out. What final word to you?
I guess to answer that question, excuse me, really, I enjoy it because as a kid, I remember growing up and seeing that, like, mom and pop store, and seeing and trying to understand, okay, like, how did they get to where they were? And then as I've gotten older and worked at different firms, I've realized that I enjoy working directly with that small entrepreneurial firm, the guy who just said, you know what, I have an idea, I have a vision, and I want to take it from A to B, and being able to understand and see that growth and development. Trust me, we love working with all the large companies as well. But I will say, from a personal perspective, it's always good to have been able to see a company really start at its infancy stage and then develop, mature, and be able to grow with that person. So it may sound, a little outdated, but again, it's that interpersonal activity and the ability to see and develop and grow and kind of be with that person along the journey, which kind of fulfills me as a professional.
Kurt, Daniel from Withum, thanks for the insight on interest rates down to the personal. Appreciate you guys being here, Kurt and Daniel. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having
me.
See you next time.